Diverse thinking to the podcast from a generational aspect.
Change doesn't have to be overwhelming. Once you've made change, your mind knows how to make change.
At any stage of our lives, we are unstoppable. Hello and welcome to Unstoppable, brought to you by VisionOne High Performance Group. And this podcast is designed with you in mind, the business leader, the owner, perhaps someone who's feeling a bit stuck, navigating a crucial change or striving to reach their full potential. That's the focus of the Unstoppable podcast. And our guest today is Justin Erickson. Now, he currently is a partner with Brookshire Company, integrating his passion and focus on rural development, offering a combination of site selection consulting and economic development. And what's fascinating is he's created this own path after being raised in southern Minnesota, still so very passionate about the positive aspects of rural life. Justin, thanks for joining us. Let's dive
Lori.
in.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I grew up in a town called Albert Lea. Most people, at least in the Midwest, are familiar with Albert Lea because they stop there for gas, because it's where I-35 and I-90 cross. And not a shot at Albert Lea, but it is the only place in the continental United States where you have an east-west, north-south freeway crossing, and you've got cornfields on all four sides. So I think Albert Lea's better days are ahead of it in terms of growth and development. But I feel nothing but gratitude for being able to grow up in a small town. Dating myself a little bit, I'm 45. So my formative years were in the mid 80s to the early 90s, graduated high school in 1997. So like a lot of kids from smaller towns, I ended up maybe not desperately wanting to get out of town, but saying, okay, what else is out there? Which then led me up to University of Minnesota. And then, but for a short stint in Kansas City, the balance of my career to date and life being here in the metro area.
And that journey of breaking out of southern Minnesota and coming to the metro, what'd you learn? And how and what made you want to stay engaged with that rural lifestyle, if you will?
I didn't necessarily want to move back to my hometown. Nothing against it. I like it in the metro here too. But I always felt like I had that perspective. Okay, I grew up in a smaller town. Now I have the perspective of working and living in a metro area. And they're different, but that isn't to suggest one is right and the other is wrong. And so I always thought that, not enough people, 83% of the people in this country live in a metropolitan area, which isn't to suggest that they haven't spent any time working, living, or just material time in general in a more rural or smaller town. But, you got to assume that 8 out of 10 people that you encounter might not have any idea what it's like to do business, what it's like to work, what it's like to live in a small town. And, and it is different, but it's not like it's a different country. And so I think bridging that gap, I think, is a message that's largely missing, but just in kind of telling that story about what is it like to do business and live in a rural area and what are those benefits. And it's not for everybody, but I think a lot of people like to know what that looks like.
Awesome. So talk to us about what you do, Justin, and how you bridge the gap.
The game for rural America from about 1945 to 1980 was largely getting land on the edge of town, going and buying it from a farmer, annexing it into the city, zoning it industrial, putting up a sign that says Progress Drive or Opportunity Way or something that implied that this is the place to do business. And then hoping and praying that the likes of 3M call and say, give us, cheap land, affordable labor, cheap taxes, and a big incentive package. We'll put up a monstrosity of a facility. We'll hire half your town. We'll pay a lot in taxes. They'll have a job their whole career. Then they get a pension. The next generation can come and work here, and rinse and repeat. And for probably the better part of 2, if not 3 generations, that worked largely well for rural America. Now, there were bad actors. I won't name them. But for the most part, I think it was an even trade between corporate America and rural communities. But that started changing in the early 1980s when all of a sudden these companies started realizing you had these emerging East Asian markets. You had this notion of globalization being talked about. By the early 90s, you had NAFTA coming down the pike. And so companies weren't necessarily looking to stay in one community for multiple generations. Pensions started going away. And so we moved more to a kind of a defined contribution as opposed to defined benefit plans. And so people weren't necessarily as tethered to one employer long term. And they just said, I'm not going to stay at one company their whole career. And so a lot of these small towns were saying by the early 90s, we don't want to try to replace those 500 jobs that we lost, or we don't necessarily want to bring in that company and wants to hire 300 people because we don't have the people to staff that type of operation. If we do, it comes at the expense of the incumbent employers that are already here. And then third, we lie awake at night knowing that we have a disproportionate number of eggs in one basket. But I think a lot of rural areas, writ large, but down to the individuals in the communities, are kind of told that rural areas just aren't good enough. And you know what? You might be a great place because it's really cheap to do business and everything costs less. And, there's a captive workforce there that'll work hard and we don't have to pay them as much. And that's why companies are coming to your town. And that's not really a real appealing message, right? If you're the people, the civic leaders in that community down to the employees at these different companies, you're probably not getting a real good feeling about that as to, why people are looking at rural areas as a good place to do business. Or I think with a lot of the smaller companies that we've done, they felt like, these companies want to be here. They're choosing to be here. They have other options and they see value and virtue in our community beyond just the tax, the tax rates and what wage rates are.
Wow. Sounds like amazing work to be helping communities. I mean, the rural communities are so important. I would love to turn our focus on you as a leader because, Justin, you talk about how you were a young leader when you first acquired your company. Wise leader now looking back. Talk to our audience and our audience of young leaders about what were some of the mindset changes you had to have over time to become a successful leader? What things did you have to do differently? And, what were some of the skills that were really important for you to learn?
To me, leader has a lot less to do with title than it does attitude. And somebody who feels like they need to do it on their own and they want to forge their own path. I think that's wonderful. But I also think that, there are a lot of people out there that altruistically want to help. And take full advantage of that. That's not a sign of weakness. That isn't a sign of you can't do it on your own. That's a sign of being savvy, because it's a lot more important to figure out, who as opposed to what as you advance more in your career.
Yeah, Justin, I love what you're saying. And a question that's just running along my mind, especially being young, but I feel like for anybody, a question that I have for you is, yes, it's good to do things on your own. And yes, it's good to ask for help. Where is the barrier line? Sometimes you get asked questions that are like, you could figure that out on your own. Where's kind of the barrier line there?
I look at it more as not if somebody has done an hour of research on me or my firm or an industry. I'm more interested in genuine curiosity, and that's something that I think is lacking. I more say, are they a genuinely curious person who wants to learn, maybe about industries, but also learn how does that apply to me and what I like to do or might not like to do? That I think is something that stands out to me.
The focus of Unstoppable is helping leaders to navigate big change, get unstuck. What's the biggest change you've had to navigate or the biggest area you were stuck in your life, and how did you overcome it?
So on the personal side, and I get accused of not coming across this way, but I'm naturally a terribly introverted person. So I'm not good in big groups, et cetera. It's not, I'm introverted. But I think what forced me out of my shell is when I was in 7th grade, my mom got very ill with cancer and then passed away when I was in 10th grade. And so by no means does that make me, pity story or anything like that. But it took otherwise a kid from a small town who was very shy and introverted. And I had to mature pretty quickly. I had to grow up. And so I would have, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. At the same time, I look at it as you can't impact what happens to you. You can only impact how you respond to it. And again, I'm throwing out a whole series of cliches here, but bad things are going to happen. How you respond to them is the only choice you have after that point. Going more into a team environment and relying on other people to do things. It was hard for me again. And Lord knows if you go to business school these days, all you do is do team projects, because you're going to have to learn to work with people. Well, we did all that too. But it was really hard for me to get back into that mindset. And now I'm grateful for the people that are on my team. I don't call them my staff or my employees. There's no pride in authorship, so to speak, but it is a team effort. And what I have relearned is that the more that you rely on other people and give them the room to run and make those mistakes that I talked about, I'm impressed that I've gotten as far as I have based on the level of aptitude and ability that I see with the people that work with me. And I think, well, they're a lot smarter than I am. So I'm grateful to take advantage of that.
It sounds like in both of those instances, you were you just got out into your uncomfortable zone and you took some risk and some maybe some faith or something to like step into something new. And what were some of the mindsets that you had to have as you were navigating those big changes?
Yeah, I think when people see something that either is going to take them out of their comfort zone or they see as a risk or what, they tend to go to an irrational level of thinking.
Yeah.
So they think of the doom and gloom and, oh my gosh, this is going to happen. And then,
Mhm.
I'm going to lose my job and then I'm going to be bankrupt and all. And then you pause and sit down and say, okay, let me just sit here and think rationally about this for a minute. What truly is the worst case scenario? And you know what? If you really rationalize it out and it is that bad, well, then maybe kind of steer clear of that. There are certainly some dumb things that people can do that they shouldn't do. But for the most part, for me, it was just having to more rationalize. No, a lot of the times you're not taking risks or you're not pursuing things because of an irrational fear that is just not realistic if you sit down and think through it. And, as maybe abstract as that is, that's been hugely influential for me to work through some of those issues to realize, what, it's probably going to be okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as you stepped into those unknown times in life, what were some of the first steps you had to take?
Again, realizing that where you are today is not next week, not next month, not next year. And so deal with the here and now and don't speculate about, what's going to go off the rails 3 months from now. You'll get there.
Right.
Have a plan, think, be forward thinking, but stay in kind of the here and now. And realize that if you are by definition taking yourself out of your comfort zone, well, people tend to, default to things that they're comfortable with, whether it's things, we're all guilty of this at work, right? There's things that we like to do and we conveniently find reasons to focus on those things. And then, Friday afternoon comes around and those 5 phone calls you're going to make or whatever it is, you never bothered to get around to. You said, I just didn't have time this week. And it's like, no, you had ample time. You chose not to do that because you didn't want to. It's not what you wanted to do. You don't like doing that. But it is work. Sometimes you need to do those things. That's what I also found too, is getting out of my comfort zone, I find is, sit there and say, okay, this is by definition not comfortable for you. It might not be what you want to do right now, but you've rationalized it through and thought this is what you need to do. So have a little fortitude here and move forward. Now, I'm speaking very abstract, but again, it's more of a mindset that I've had to employ that has helped me work through some of those things and not just pull back and say, nope, can't do that. It's not comfortable.
So it sounds like you took that weakness and you turned it into strength by leveraging some of your other strengths and your power of relationship and relying on other people. And
what's interesting to me is I know a few people, I've got a couple of friends and other people I know that are very good extroverted sales and marketing types. They love nothing more than going and working a room or going to an event and meeting with people. I'd rather lose a fingernail than do that sometimes. I think one of the things that I see a lot from people, because my background's in finance, I've mentored some kids with finance, and they'll say, I'm not really a salesperson, or I think it's going to hurt my career because I'm more analytically minded and I'm not naturally outgoing. And I think that's a misconception that the salespeople are always the boisterous, loud ones in the room and just love to go out, play golf and get drinks and do all that. A mentor of mine in college told me, he said, look, get a sales degree when you get out, or a sales job when you get out of school. And I said, I'm not really a salesperson. And he said, you know what, even if you're not good at it, and I think he might have been implying he didn't think I'd be good at it, but even if you're not good at it, if you can do it and you understand that mindset of having to hit a number, a quota, you will understand the vantage point of the sales end of an organization, and you'll have respect from people because you're going to understand what it's like to walk in their shoes, at least at a very generalized basis. And so I think that's taught me a little bit too, that you don't have to just take a personality test or based on what, subjects you were good at in high school or what you might have a college degree in and say, well, that now needs to correlate to my personality. I'm an accountant, so therefore I must be the quiet one, who is not necessarily. I know some accountants that are CEOs and you would not know that they're accountants and arguably aren't that good with numbers, but hey, they're CPAs technically. So
sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
awesome. I can relate
That's
with you. I'm a
terrific.
huge introvert as well. So and I will also say, if I'm ever looking for a resource or need to be connected to somebody, you're one of the first people I think of. I think you're one of the most networked people I know. So,
well, the irony, a younger guy in our office that works in my team, he said, you seem to know a lot of people. And I said, it's just evidence. That's evidence of me getting old is all that speaks to. But it's like, but you're not naturally outgoing and whatnot. And I said, Okay, you can stop there, I told him. But I said, here's the deal. Early on, especially when I bought this business, one of the things that dawned on me right away is that, those companies aren't waking up on a given Wednesday morning saying, I wonder if there's a guy that we can track down or a company that could help us navigate our way through rural South Dakota. Not a lot of people are doing that. So I had to get out and talk to businesses. And it might have been more effort versus rather than just picking up the phone and calling companies. I found accountants, attorneys, consultants, on and on, bankers, and got to know them, and ultimately am grateful to this day for the referrals that I get. But I built those relationships, and I think, again, back to my more introverted nature, I think what maybe helped make it stick a little bit more is really doing some homework, getting to know those people, following up with them, making sure that you take mental notes about who they are, what's important to them. If they make a mention about their kids or, something in their family, not to bring it up the next time you connect with them in some sort of self-serving way. But if you show a genuine interest in people and it comes across as genuine, you'd be amazed at how many people remember you and actually want to help you.
Yeah, well, and it goes back to what you said earlier about having that natural curiosity. As kids, we're curious, we're learning, and to embrace that. I find that exciting because that really gives you that passion for just continuing to learn.
Yeah, 100%.
That's
so
great.
I mean, you've navigated some big changes in your life. I mean, losing your mom early and starting a business and then transitioning your business. And so, if you were to give our listeners one piece of advice of the biggest takeaway from all of that, what would it be?
Yeah, I think what I have probably learned the most is taking that attitude or that approach of, what, I'll continue to learn things as it relates to my vocation, but I am who I am and I'm not going to change. And, what you see is what you get. And then I thought, well, what, that's a choice. And so, we've all presumably done some of those personality tests to varying degrees and whatnot. And what, it's good on the side of the ledger that you score high on, and you think, I am perceptive and I am, good at this. And then you see the other side and say, what do you mean I'm, completely lacking self-awareness and this, that, and the other. And so I've really worked on that the last couple of years, not just to be more empathetic, but also to be self-aware of how I'm perceived to people, and what I might say that is, in my mind, seemingly benign, or what I might think is funny, somebody else might not find it so funny. So maybe, throttle back a little bit there and understanding, people's approach to work. And again, I'm of that mindset, getting first jobs in the mid to late 1990s, and you were just lucky to have a job and you're going to get experience, but you're not going to get paid much, same as through internships. And now I have a lot of clients, whether it's operations managers, HR VPs, all the way up to CEOs, that I think bristle. And again, this goes back to you, Tyler, that I think your generation unfairly gets blamed a lot of times as, well, they don't want to work hard, or, they want flexible work schedules and they want to know what the company's doing. Well, you know what? The supply demand curve has shifted, in that, there's a lot more jobs that are out there. And, from a supply demand standpoint, you don't know any different, nor should you, to say, I'm going to be a little bit more selective, because I shouldn't just leap at the first opportunity that comes my way, because there are other opportunities out there. And I don't think that's to blame your generation so much as it's to blame, not to blame, but to suggest to a lot of the, the Gen X types up to, respectfully, the baby boomer types, to say, what, we have to look at it differently. It's not a generational issue with the younger generation, and they're the ones to point the finger at. We're going to have this issue for 20 years, and there's myriad reasons behind it I can go into, but the reality is it's here, and we're going to have to cater differently, because what, you're not a commodity, the younger generation, and you're now a scarce resource. And so we have to change the way that we think about labor, and accommodate, or we can't be upset if those people don't want to work for us.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, I think that's my biggest takeaway. I mean, we've been doing sales leader assessments and hiring assessments for many, many years. And that's a frustration that I have, is that a lot of times companies think that sales is a one size fits all, and actually successful salespeople are the ones that figure out how the skill of selling through how they're being wired. And so, there's many different types of salespeople that fit different types of roles. And so I think that's a really great point. And just a message to young leaders that that's the case, not just in sales, but also in accounting or operations or marketing or HR or whatever it is, that there isn't a one size fits all.
Right.
It's about how do you leverage the strengths of who you are and find the company and the role that fits that, and then apply the skills to that. So I think that's a really great point for young leaders who are growing up with a kind of a feeling of, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And so just to be able to inspire them with that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Unstoppable. We hope it left you feeling inspired and ready to take that first step toward overcoming challenges, breaking free from what's holding you back, making meaningful changes in your life, business, or community. At VisionOne, we're passionate about helping leaders, organizations, and communities navigate critical changes, whether it's growing your business, preparing for an exit, embracing the next chapter, or guiding the transition to new leadership. Imagine a dedicated team working alongside you every step of the way, providing strategic planning, customized fractional HR services that are tailored to meet your unique needs. That's what VisionOne High Performance offers. If you're interested in learning more about how we can help you become truly unstoppable, let's connect through peer groups, workshops, internal workshops, perhaps a retreat. Visit us at visiononeperformance.com to start the conversation.